Hey there, tonight we're not sailing, we're surviving. You've just woken up in darkness. Thick, humid air clings to your skin. Somewhere nearby, something large and feathered lets out a screech. A goat kicks the side of the wall. Water drips steadily from the ceiling. Welcome aboard the Ark, not the floating bathtub from children's books, but a creaking, sweating, animal-crammed lifeboat for the end of the world. Forget bedtime stories. This is what it felt like to survive a flood sent by God. Before we begin, go ahead and settle in, lay back, let the rain outside your window blend with the storm outside these wooden walls. And if you enjoy these immersive Bible journeys, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more sacred sleep stories, and drop a comment telling us which biblical moment you'd want to experience next. Tonight, you are Noah. You've built the impossible. You've obeyed when no one else listened. And now you're trapped in a floating barn with the last beating hearts on earth, waiting for the rain to stop. Take a deep breath. The world has ended, and somehow you're still here. The world is loud, restless, aching under the weight of its own corruption. But not here. Here, in the early light before dawn, you wake to bird song and the quiet shuffle of sheep. The earth smells rich and alive, the way it always does just before the rain. You stretch, bones stiff from yesterday's labour, and glance across the plain. The half-built vessel towers in the distance, a strange silhouette against the sky. People still laugh when they see it, but their laughter grows thinner each day. Your name is Noah. You don't feel chosen. You feel tired, worn like the wooden pegs in your calloused hands. But the voice that once spoke to you, clear as thunder, still echoes in your chest. Build, so you do. Each nail driven into gopher wood, a strange mix of obedience and faith. Your sons stir nearby, rubbing sleep from their eyes. There's still so much left to do. And time, though no one else sees it, is vanishing like mist from the grass. By midday, the sun sits high and merciless above your shoulders. Sweat beads on your brow as your hammer strikes rhythmically against the curved frame of the ark. Each thud rings like a heartbeat, steady, determined. Around you, the laughter of neighbours drifts across the wind. They've gathered again, curious and mocking. A few children dare closer, pointing and giggling. Their parents call them back, pretending not to be afraid. But you keep working. The measurements weren't yours, they were given. 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high. A floating sanctuary built, not for pleasure, but for preservation. You glance at your sons, Shem lugging timber, Ham adjusting a beam, Japheth lost in thought. They've given up asking questions. They trust you, or perhaps they trust the fear in your eyes. And your wife, her quiet strength, steadies your trembling hands. Somewhere deep, you hope you're wrong. That rain will never come, that the world isn't really ending. But still, you build. Years slip quietly by, and the rhythm of work becomes the soundtrack of your life. The timbers rise, the shape of the ark emerging like a great beast from the dust. Your sons once, boys chasing insects beneath fig trees, now stand tall beside you, their hands calloused, their brows furrowed with shared purpose. Together, you haul planks, drive pegs, and seal gaps with pitch, your movements syncing like a sacred dance learned by heart. Their laughter sometimes breaks through the drone of labour, and in rare quiet moments, you glimpse the men they are becoming faithful, determined, and bound to a task no one else understands. But outside your walls of rising wood, the laughter turns cruel. Neighbours jeer more boldly now, their insults louder, crueler. Children mimic your hammering in mockery. Strangers stop to scoff at the absurdity of a ship on dry land, calling it madness, calling you deluded. Some throw stones, not to wound your body, but to chip away at your resolve. Yet you keep building. Every insult, every sideways glance is a reminder of what they don't yet see. The storm hasn't come, but it will. And when it does, this laughter will echo differently in their memories, if they remember it at all. It starts slowly, barely noticeable at first. a pair of doves circling the ark, then landing side by side on a beam. Then come the foxes, slinking from the tree line with silent steps and steady eyes. You pause mid-swing with your hammer, heart pounding not in fear, but in reverent awe. The air seems to hum with something ancient and holy. Day by day, they arrive in twos, lions padding through tall grass, frogs leaping in perfect sync, wolves and deer walking shoulder to shoulder without tension. There is no chaos, no struggle, just purpose. It's not that you called them. It's that they heard something deeper, something the rest of the world refuses to listen for. But the people notice too, and now their laughter fades into unease. Children cling to their mothers as the great serpents slither across dry stones. Elderly men cross themselves and hurry back down the hillsides. Even the most brazen scoffers go silent as towering giraffes emerge from the haze, eyes slow, blinking, and peaceful. I don't understand what they're seeing, and that terrifies them more than anything. You catch glimpses of them from the scaffolding whispers, pointing fingers, hurried retreats. They don't have words for this, but deep down they feel it. The storm is closer than they thought. The skies still hold their colour, but the air has shifted heavier, stiller. Each morning now begins in silence, as if creation itself is holding its breath. You wake before the sun, hearts steady, movements careful. God's voice, once like thunder in your soul, now speaks with deep, quiet authority. It is time. Gather your household. Bring in the last provisions. The words are few, but you understand the weight behind them. There is no panic, just precision. You and your sons move through the final tasks with focused urgency, as if you've done this 100 times before. The ark groans under the weight of barrels, grain sacks, baskets of figs and dates, amphorae of water. Every item has its place. Every step echoes like a countdown. Inside the ark, the air smells of fresh-cut cedar, of animals and earth. Lanterns swing gently from pegs, casting golden pools of light across the straw-covered floors. Your wife and daughters-in-law tuck folded blankets into corners, secure ropes, check stores of herbs and healing salves. The animals, eerily obedient, settle into their pens without struggle, as though they too sense what's coming. Outside, the last curious villagers have wandered home, no longer shouting insults. A strange stillness blankets the hills. The moment is close, so close you can feel it on your skin, not just the weight of rain, but of finality. You stand at the base of the ramp, hand resting on the wooden hull, and whisper a prayer, not for survival, but for faith that doesn't waver in the silence before the storm. The skies grow darker than you've ever seen them, thick, bruised clouds rolling in from every direction like a tidal wave swallowing the horizon. The wind stirs suddenly, whipping dust into the air and rattling branches. Somewhere behind you, thunder murmurs low, as if the heavens are clearing their throat. It begins slowly first, with an unnatural quiet, then with gasps and cries rising from the village. People who once laughed at you now stand frozen, eyes wide, pointing at the churning sky. Mothers clutch their children. Animals outside the ark pace restlessly. The first raindrop hits your hand like a warning. Then another, then hundreds. You call to your sons. Without words, they understand. Together you begin ushering the last of the animals up the ramp, your wife and daughters-in-law following closely behind. The villagers gather, shouting your name now, not in mockery, but in desperation. "Let us in!" someone screams. You hesitate just a second at the top of the ramp, heart twisting, watching old friends pound their fists against the rising wind. But obedience overrides emotion. With trembling hands, you enter the ark's belly. As the final family member steps inside, the door groans, then shuts, not by your strength, but by an unseen force. The air inside shifts. You've entered a new world now, one sealed by God, waiting on the edge of flood and faith. The moment the door closes behind you, it's as if the entire world exhales. A deep silence settles inside the ark, thick, sacred, final. You stand there, hands still outstretched, the echo of the groaning hinges fading into stillness. Your family gathers around you, their eyes wide, breaths held. For the first time in decades, no hammer strikes, no animals shuffle, no jeers pierce the air, just stillness. It's a silence, not born of peace, but of awe, of something holy and irreversible having just occurred. The absence of sound carries weight, pressing into your chest. God himself has shut the door. No more time, no more debate. The judgment is set. Then, without warning, a soft patter begins overhead. At first it could be mistaken for wind or shouting animals, but you know, it's rain. Real, heavy rain. A few drops tap against the ark's roof, followed by a sudden sheet of water, cold and relentless. The sound builds quickly, becoming a constant drumming that wraps around the vessel. You exchange glances with your sons, each of you understanding the gravity of what's begun. Outside, the world is changing first slowly, then rapidly. Inside, you brace for what is to come. The flood has begun, not with a roar, but with a whisper. The rain pounds harder, turning from steady taps to a deafening roar against the ark's wooden hull. The very air inside feels soaked with tension, every thunderclap vibrating through the planks beneath your feet. Water rushes in torrents now, cascading down the slopes, gushing into every low place. Inside, animals shift nervously, some growling, others braying, but all reacting to the unnatural, relentless downpour. Your wife clutches your hand without speaking. There are no more questions, just waiting, just listening. Then come the cries. Muffled at first, distant voices rising in panic. You strain to hear through the storm, but the screams grow clearer, closer. People pounding on the ark's sides, begging to be let in. Their pleas claw at your heart. Names you recognize, voices of neighbors, friends, even former mockers now wailing for rescue. It's unbearable, but the door, sealed by God's own hand, will not move. You feel the weight of obedience crushing against the ache of compassion, and still the rain falls. Still the water rises. Inside the ark, the world becomes dim and close, lit only by flickering oil lamps casting long shadows against wooden walls. The space echoes with the layered sounds of creation, lowing cattle, rustling feathers, restless hooves shifting on straw-covered floors. The scent of damp wood mingles with the earthy musk of animals, forming a dense, living atmosphere. Rain drums overhead like 1,000 beating hearts, a constant rhythm that neither fades nor relents. Every so often, the groan of shifting timbers reminds you how massive this vessel truly is, and how alive. The ark is no longer just a structure. It breathes, creaks, waits. Noah kneels near the center of it all, hands clasped tightly, lips moving in silent prayer. His shoulders sag with the weight of it, the judgment unfolding outside, the lives entrusted within. He prays not only for deliverance, but for strength, the peace, the understanding. Around him the family stays quiet, listening. A donkey brays once, abruptly, then settles. The lantern beside Noah flickers as a draft moves through the seams. His voice rises slightly, not desperate, but steady, rooted in faith. In the thick shadows of the ark, his prayers become the only clarity, the only light. The storm shows no mercy. Day blurs into night beneath an endless torrent of rain, the roar of the deluge unbroken. Winds howl like wounded animals, slamming against the ark with such force that the great vessel groans in protest. Waves, unseen in the darkness, crash and churn below, tossing the ark from side to side. Inside, every creak of timber feels like a question will it hold. The animals grow restless, some pacing, others crying out in confusion or fear. The steady flicker of lantern light does little to calm the weight of time stretching unbearably long. Among the family, silence begins to fray. Sleep is shallow and interrupted. Conversations trail off into tension, small disagreements over feeding schedules, or spilled water flaring louder than they should. paces more than he sits. Shem keeps his hands busy, mending anything he can just to stay focused. Japheth stares out into the rain, as if hoping to see an end. Noah remains steady, but even he walks more slowly now, his prayers quieter. The air inside feels close, heavy, not just with breath and bodies, but with the unspoken fear of how long this storm will last, and whether their endurance will outlast it. The waters rise until the very memory of dry ground feels like a dream. Peaks vanish beneath churning grey, swallowed one by one until the horizon is nothing but sky meeting flood. The ark floats alone, an island of life adrift on a world remade by judgment. There are no markers now, no trees, no hills, no sun-bleached paths leading home, just water stretching endless in every direction. The silence between storms is somehow worse, amplifying the eerie emptiness of the outside world. The ark is no longer shelter from a storm, it is exile. Inside, the family adjusts to their new reality with quiet resignation. Isolation begins to take its toll. Each day blends into the next, measured only by feedings, prayers, and routine. There's no word from heaven, no clear sign of how long they must endure. Questions linger unspoken. Have we done enough? Will this truly end? The animals sense the tension too, moods shifting with the rhythm of the humans who care for them. Noah remains calm, but even his face tightens in thought more often now. Survival is no longer just physical, it's a battle of the spirit, one that demands faith in the silence and obedience without answer. Days pass in long, rhythmic cycles, an unexpected kind of order emerging from chaos. Each family member finds a task and clings to it like a lifeline. The suns rise early to check the lower levels, where the heavier animals stir in their pens. Hay is distributed, troughs are filled, and waste is cleared with practiced speed. The women tend to the smaller creatures, feeding birds by hand, soothing nervous goats with gentle voices. Amid the echoing creaks of wood and the distant rumble of rain, the ark becomes a world of its own, half zoo, half monastery, where silence and survival walk hand in hand. In the dim spaces between animal stalls, barrels of grain are opened, roots are sorted, and dried fruits are rationed with care. Noah's wife keeps a careful record of every item used, her fingers stained with ink from tallying supplies. Fires are kindled low for warmth and cooking, the smoke guided up through carved vents in the upper levels. Meals are simple but nourishing lentils, flat bread, dried figs softened in water. As the flood rages beyond the walls, life inside becomes almost routine, each task a reminder that while the world outside has been undone, discipline and duty remain a form of sacred resistance. The days begin to blur, and with them, patience thins. Inside the ark, space feels tighter with each passing sunrise. Tension simmers between the sons, small disagreements over feeding schedules, over who forgot to secure a stall door, over how long the storm might last. What once was camaraderie, forged in obedience, now cracks under pressure. Japheth raises his voice too sharply. Ham slams a storage lid too hard. Even Shem, the peacemaker, begins to withdraw, his silence louder than the other's words. Claustrophobia wraps around them all like a second skin. The same wooden beams that kept them safe now feel like prison bars. Noah senses it early. He watches their tempers flare like sparks in dry grass and calls them together by lantern light. His voice is low but firm, steadied by years of listening to silence and speaking with God. He reminds them why they are here, not just to survive, but to preserve. He speaks of their mother's quiet strength, of the animals depending on them, of the world they are meant to rebuild. His words are not grand, but they carry the weight of both authority and love. Slowly, eyes soften, hands unclench. The ark doesn't feel bigger, but for a moment, the air inside feels lighter, as if forgiveness itself had found room to breathe. Some mornings, the storm pauses, The air hums with a strange quiet, broken only by the rustle of feathers, the soft grunt of animals stirring in their pens. These rare moments of calm become sacred. Shem leans against the side of the ark, a drowsy goat resting its head against his leg. Lamb begins sketching the curve of an elephant's tusk in the dirt, while Japheth sits near the doves, letting one peck gently at his open palm. Even the predators seem subdued, lulled by the rhythm of routine. In these peaceful interludes, the family breathes deeply, not just out of relief, but reverence. Noah uses the stillness to reflect. He watches his sons laugh for the first time in days and feels something stir inside gratitude, laced with awe. The ark, once just timber and sweat, has become a floating sanctuary. Every snort, cluck, and chirp around him speaks of life preserved, of obedience fulfilled. He wonders aloud quietly, more to God than to the room, what the world will look like when the waters recede. Was judgment always the only way? Was mercy hidden in the flood? These questions float unanswered, but they bind Noah closer to the one who sees the beginning and the end. Noah's thoughts drift backward, unbitten, as the ark creaks gently around him. He remembers the villages teeming with laughter and life, children racing through narrow paths, elders telling stories under olive trees. But beneath that joy had always lurked a darker rhythm, the clang of iron weapons, the shouts of bitter arguments, the cries of the wronged. He recalls the weight in his spirit, as violence became commonplace, as hearts grew cold, as justice became a stranger in the land. The contrast now is staggering. Here, in this wooden womb, peace hums like a quiet song. But that peace came at a terrible cost. Sitting in the dim glow of an oil lamp, Noah runs his fingers across a carved plank, one Shem had etched with symbols before the rain began. The scent of cedar mixes with the musk of animals and the faint perfume of preserved herbs. But even in this safety, sorrow presses in. The faces of neighbours, of kin who scoffed and turned away, haunt the silence. Lamech's old orchard, now buried beneath waves, the marketplace in Nod, gone. Noah lowers his head, not in shame, but in mourning. Even obedience can ache, even faith must sometimes weep. The sound of flapping wings cuts through the damp stillness as Noah opens a hatch and gently releases the raven into the open sky. Its dark form arcs against the grey clouds, circling once before vanishing beyond the horizon. The moment is small but charged with meaning. For days, the family has lived in the monotony of floating, silent waves rocking them, winds howling, with no end in sight. But now, this act of sending out the raven is more than a test. It is an offering of hope, a question sent out into the world. Is it time? Is there dry land? Is the ordeal nearing its end? The raven doesn't return, but Noah watches the sky long after it disappears. Something shifts within him, not certainty, but a whisper of possibility. Around him, the others notice too. Eyes that are dulled from waiting now blink with cautious anticipation. Even the animals seem more alert, their restlessness echoing the mood. Yet, days pass, and the horizon remains unchanged. No mountaintops, no shore. The hope sparked by the raven doesn't fade, but it changes shape, no longer demanding answers, only asking for patience. Noah gently strokes the soft feathers of the dove as he prepares to release it, his hands steady, but his chest tight with anticipation. This bird, gentler and more symbolic than the raven, feels like a prayer in flight. He opens the small window once more, and the dove leaps into the open sky, flapping quickly until it becomes a pale speck against the still clouded heavens. Everyone watches in silence, sons, daughters-in-law, animals all caught in the weight of this delicate moment. If it finds land, it will return with a sign. If not, it may not return at all. Either outcome will speak volumes. Hours pass. The tension builds like a string pulled taut. Every creak of the ark is a question. Every flutter of wings outside could be the return. But when the dove finally reappears, wings tired and feet empty, the collective breath in the ark feels stolen. No twig, no leaf, just weary wings and a familiar silhouette. It returns, not with answers, but with a message nonetheless. Not yet. The disappointment is quiet but deep. Still, the very return of the dove suggests it found no rest, meaning perhaps that someday soon it will. Hope doesn't die here, it simply waits again. Days stretch on with no horizon in sight, just water, sky, and the creaking heartbeat of the ark. The air grows heavier with each sunrise, the same motions repeated endlessly. Feeding animals, patching worn ropes, sharing silent meals. Supplies begin to dwindle, the sacks of grain feel lighter, the dried fruit becomes scarce. Even the freshest water must be rationed with a care that deepens the unease among Noah's family. Faces look thinner, conversations grow shorter. Everyone tries to hide their worry, but it hangs over them like another storm cloud. Noah sits alone some evenings, staring into the dim lamplight with his hands clasped tight, not in prayer, but in something closer to uncertainty. He still speaks to God, but the silence he hears in return begins to echo louder than any thunder he's faced. Had he misunderstood? Had he failed somehow? The enormity of what he carries his family's survival, the memory of a drowned world, the burden of obedience weighs on him. Faith doesn't vanish, but it flickers like a candle in wind, and still he waits. Just when hope seemed like a fragile thread fraying in the dark, the flap of wings breaks the heavy stillness. The dove returns its feet damp, feathers ruffled from flight, but in its beak, something remarkable, a single olive leaf. Noah stares at it in disbelief. Not driftwood, not seaweed, but a sign of life. A sign the waters have begun to recede. A sign the earth is healing. His chest tightens with emotion, and for a moment he cannot speak. Then the others gather around, and a ripple of joy moves through the family like a second miracle. Laughter bursts forth from tired mouths as they pass the olive leaf hand to hand, marveling at its green tenderness. For the first time in weeks, someone opens a shutter, and there, flooding the ark, is golden sunlight. Not the dim, grey haze they've known, but true, warm light. It spills across their faces and glints off damp wooden walls. The animals stir, blinking in the brightness. Noah steps forward, holding the dove gently in both hands. He whispers a prayer of thanks, not just for survival, but for the return of beauty, of land, of promise. The days that follow feel different, lighter somehow. Outside, the steady slosh of water against the ark's hull softens, replaced by muffled drips and the occasional groan of shifting wood. When Noah peeks through the high window again, he sees it, jagged peaks rising through thinning mist, their rocky tips dark against the morning sky. The waters are retreating, not fast, not all at once, but slowly, steadily, as though the earth is exhaling after holding its breath for too long. The air smells different, too no longer damp and sealed, but tinged with mud, moss, and something unmistakably alive. The scent of a world reawakening. Inside the ark, the change isn't lost on the animals. Paws scratch more at wooden floors, wings flap with renewed energy, snouts lift, sniffing the breeze. The stillness that had settled over the ark like a blanket begins to lift. Birds call out more often, large beasts pace within their pens. Even the smaller creatures seem restless, sensing what's coming before words are spoken. Noah walks the narrow corridors of the ark, offering soft reassurances to man and beast alike, knowing that while they are not yet free, the promise of land real, solid land draws near. The first sight of the mountaintops feels like a miracle, jagged peaks emerging from the sea like ancient sentinels. Noah stands at the small opening near the top of the ark, staring in stunned silence. Behind him, his sons gather one by one, their breath catching as the mountains shimmer under the rising sun. There's laughter, tears, a surge of emotion, none of them can quite name. Joy bursts into the still air like birdsong, yet it's not pure. Fear trails closely behind it. What waits beyond those peaks? What's left of the world they knew? The unknown stretches out before them, both beautiful and terrifying. That night, Noah prays aloud, the way he did before the rains came. His voice cracks, not from doubt, but from overwhelming awe. Around him the family listens, their hands clasped, their eyes shut tight. He doesn't ask for answers, only guidance, strength, gratitude, and trust for whatever comes next. Above them, the stars glimmer with renewed clarity. It's a night soaked in holy stillness. They've survived the flood, but now comes something just as daunting, the beginning again. The morning air carries a stillness that feels different, expectant. As Noah stands at the ark's edge, the light spilling across the peaks, he hears it, the voice that guided him through the impossible. God's words are calm, steady, and sure. They don't thunder like the storm once did, but settle deep into Noah's chest with clarity. It is time, the voice says, though not quite yet. Instructions follow measured, deliberate. There's a final wait, a sacred pause between deliverance and release. The land must finish preparing itself, the earth still drying beneath their feet. But the message is clear. Soon they will step into a new world. The news moves through the ark like fire through dry straw. Quiet excitement, restrained joy. The animals stir more easily now, pacing, sensing the shift. The family begins their preparations with a reverence born of awe. They check the food stores, organize the baskets, mend what can be mended. The ark feels less like a prison and more like a waiting room, now a space between two worlds. Hope hums beneath every task. They know the flood was never the end of the story. A new beginning is near. A groan echoes through the ark's heavy beams as the great door, sealed by God himself, creaks open for the first time in months. Light floods in brilliant, golden, almost blinding. Dust dances in the air like tiny blessings. Noah steps forward, his sandal pressing into thick, damp earth. The ground is soft beneath him, strange and unfamiliar. The scent of mud and wet stone fills his lungs, sharper than anything he's smelled in ages. Behind him, his family waits breathlessly. Then, one by one, they follow, feet sinking slightly into the reborn soil. There are no crowds, no cities, no voices, just the wind whispering across open land. The world is eerily quiet. No birdsong yet, no distant barking of dogs or shouts of market vendors, just silence, deep and total. Even the animals pause, wide-eyed, ears flicking as they take it all in. The sky stretches endlessly above them, a vast dome washed clean by the flood. Noah stands still, overwhelmed. Everything from before noise, corruption, crowds has been wiped away. What remains is raw and sacred. A new chapter has begun, and their first steps on this untouched land feel like walking across holy ground. Noah gently lifts the latch on the nearest pen, and with a creak and a shuffle, the first animals are freed. A pair of gazelles bound forward, tentative at first, then bursting into the open with joy. Doves wheel upward in sudden flight, their wings slicing the quiet sky. Elephants trumpet, oxen low, and monkeys chatter as they scatter down the ramp. The once orderly ark erupts into a wild symphony of sound and movement. After months of confinement, the creatures explode into freedom, hooves stamping the softened earth, paws skimming new grass, wings beating against a sky they thought they'd forgotten. For a long moment, Noah simply watches, breath held. The ecosystem is being reborn before his eyes. Animals scatter to find niches in this unmarked wilderness. No paths, no fences, no human boundaries. The ark, once a place of survival, now stands behind them like a relic. The balance of life begins again in real time, not with human intervention, but by divine instinct. Each creature, great and small, carries with it the seeds of restoration. The world hums with fresh energy. untamed, unpredictable, and alive. The family steps onto the damp earth, their sandals sinking slightly into the softened soil, eyes wide with awe. For a moment, no one speaks. Then Ham lets out a breathless laugh, half joy, half disbelief. Japheth drops to his knees, scooping a handful of soil and letting it run through his fingers like a treasure. Nearby, Shem throws his arms around their mother, and the two of them begin to weep, not from sorrow, but from sheer, overwhelming relief. The sky above is the purest blue they've seen in over a year, and the scent of new growth rides on the breeze. They've survived. They've stepped into a new beginning. Noah stands slightly apart, his weathered hands raised as he begins to sing softly a psalm of gratitude, a tune familiar but now somehow reborn. His voice is low at first, cracked with emotion, but soon the others join in. The melody swells across the open space, echoing faintly between nearby hills. Their song carries the weight of mourning and the lightness of hope, of endurance through terror and awe at God's mercy. It is reverence and release, all wrapped in melody. In that moment, with tears streaming and voices lifted, they are not just survivors of the flood, they are witnesses to the promise of renewal. As the singing fades, Noah moves with quiet purpose, gathering smooth stones and arranging them carefully into a rough altar. Each piece is placed with intention, as though setting the foundation not just for worship, but for this new chapter of human history. His sons assist him silently, handing him rocks, watching their father's movements with reverence. When the final stone is placed, Noah steps back, his eyes reflecting the weight of all they've endured. From nearby bundles salvaged from the ark, he retrieves the clean animals set aside for this purpose, the first offering on the new earth. The fire crackles to life, smoke rising into the still morning air. The scent of burning flesh mingles with the sweet tang of fresh soil and dew, a fragrance both sacred and somber. Noah closes his eyes as the flames climb higher, his whispered prayer of thanksgiving barely audible over the soft rustling of trees newly awakened by sunlight. This act isn't merely ritual, it's a declaration: God, we are yours, everything is yours. Around him, his family bows their heads, the moment thick with awe and humility. Here, in the silence of a reborn world, gratitude speaks loudest through fire and faith. As the final embers of the sacrifice drift upward into the brightening sky, a hush settles over the land. Then, like a voice not heard, but deeply felt, God speaks again. His words are not thunderous this time, but calm, full of solemn promise. A covenant is made, not just with Noah and his family, but with all life that now breathes on this cleansed earth. Never again, he declares, will floodwaters destroy all living things. The weight of that assurance sinks into Noah's chest, a promise sealed not by ink, but by divine mercy. Then it happens, a shimmer in the retreating mist, a sweep of colour bending across the sky. The rainbow stretches from one horizon to the other, vivid, impossibly wide, painted in hues no human hand could ever mix. The family stares in stunned silence, mouths parted, eyes brimming. It's a sign, unlike any other, a visible reminder that even after wrath, God's heart bends toward grace. In this arc of light lies peace, restoration, and the quiet declaration that life will go on. The rainbow still lingers in the sky when Noah's sons begin to spread out, curiosity driving their steps across the damp earth. Shem heads toward a grove of young trees, running his fingers over their wet bark. Ham laughs as he follows a flock of birds startled into flight, while Japheth kneels beside a stream, watching how it flows freely now, unbound by the flood's chaos. Each man moves with a mix of wonder and determination, knowing this is more than a return, it's the first step toward building a new world. Every footprint they leave behind marks a beginning. Noah stands alone near the altar, his eyes tracing the curve of the rainbow now fading into the sky. The silence is not empty, it's full, pregnant with memory and meaning. He thinks of the world as it was, the voices lost, the violence drowned beneath the water, and now, this. A second chance. He closes his eyes, breathing in the scent of wet earth and smoke. There's grief still, but also gratitude. The journey isn't over, but something has shifted inside him. Where there was only burden, now there's peace. A quiet, enduring peace. Noah runs his fingers through the soil, rich, dark and soft from the flood's receding waters. He kneels and presses a vine cutting into the earth, firm and deliberate. Around him, his sons prepare plots of land, gathering seeds and making crude tools. The planting of this vineyard feels symbolic, almost sacred. Not just a practical act for future fruit, but a quiet declaration that life continues, that there will be growth, sweetness, and time enough for harvest. The wind smells different now, less wild, more familiar. It carries the scent of damp leaves and ripening change. The days lengthen. Birds nest in the newly grown branches, and morning mist rolls gently across the fields. Noah watches as lambs leap in the grass, as his grandchildren chase one another in circles. There's laughter again, real, sustained laughter. Fires are built not just for warmth, but for cooking and sharing meals. The vineyard's first shoots peek from the soil, delicate and green. As the seasons begin their cycle anew, cold giving way to warmth, then warmth to ripe summer, the rhythm of normal life returns, and with it a deep, wordless comfort that God, after all the judgment and water, still allows joy to take root. At night, as the fire crackles low and the vineyard lies still, Noah's mind drifts backward. He sees again the towering structures of the old cities, homes carved from stone, bustling markets, voices echoing through narrow alleys. The memories are stained with both light and shadow, families laughing over shared meals, but also cruelty masked in opulence, injustice dressed as law. He recalls the weight of watching those cities fall not to war, but to water. Streets became rivers, altars vanished beneath waves, the proud rooftops of mighty men disappeared without a trace. Even now, he hears echoes of voices lost to the flood, carried on the night wind like distant weeping. But Noah does not dwell in mourning. Instead, he turns his eyes toward the future. The land is silent now, but not barren. In the absence of the old, something new waits to emerge. His sons speak of shaping new dwellings, of raising children with gentler hands, of honouring God, not just in words, but in living. The earth itself seems eager, soft underfoot, scented with promise, and as Noah lifts his gaze to the starlit sky, he dares to imagine cities that rise not in arrogance, but in reverence. Not replicas of the world that was, but foundations for the world that could be, a world rebuilt not from ambition, but from awe. That evening, beneath a sky still streaked with the fading colours of dusk, Noah sits beside his wife near the edge of the vineyard. The silence between them is long, but not empty. The hands, weathered and wise, rest folded in her lap, and when she finally speaks, her voice carries the weight of both loss and survival. They talk of the people they once knew, neighbours, friends, family long gone. There's grief there, yes, but it is no longer raw. It has softened into something reverent, something that honours what was without clinging to it. Noah listens, nods, then speaks of the burden he carried, of the choices he questioned, and how her steadfast presence steadied him through every wave. Their conversation drifts toward the future, toward the children now laying foundations for a new world. Together, they speak of the legacy they hope to leave, not just land and seed, but faith, humility, reverence. She smiles gently, imagining grandchildren chasing one another through groves of fig trees, learning to pray, to build, to forgive. They may not live to see the fullness of this new beginning, but their hearts rest in the belief that their obedience carved a path for those who come after. As night deepens and stars bloom overhead, the couple sits in quiet peace, united by memory, held together by hope. One crisp morning, As dew clings to the new grass and the sun begins its steady climb, Noah stands on a ridge overlooking the vast landscape. In the distance, silhouettes of animals, some familiar, others strange, dot the horizon. Deer bound in pairs across fields of young green. Birds rise in synchronized waves from trees, their cries echoing across the valley. Even the larger beasts, elephants, oxen, lions, can be seen slowly meandering toward distant hills. A quiet awe settles over Noah as he watches the natural rhythm reassert itself, the creatures no longer confined, but drawn by something ancient, some divine instinct leading them home. The migration marks more than movement. It signals balance, returning to a world once drowned in chaos. Where there was silence, now birdsong. Where the air once reeked of rot and despair, now it smells of earth and rain-washed bark. The animals begin carving new paths through the soil, trampling down the beginnings of roads and boundaries in this reborn land. Noah closes his eyes and offers a silent prayer, not just of thanks, but of recognition. Life is finding its order again, not through man's design, but through God's. A flood washed the earth clean, but it is creation itself that now brings it back to harmony. I hope you're enjoying this peaceful journey so far. I'm now going to hand you over to a good friend of mine to continue our story.
That night, under a sky unpolluted by anything but stars, Noah drifts into sleep beside the glowing embers of their modest campfire. In his dreams, he walks through a lush, unspoiled garden, the air thick with the scent of fruit and blossoms, the ground soft beneath his feet. He hears the faint sound of laughter, the pure kind that only children and the innocent can produce. Trees stretch tall and unscarred by axe or fire, their leaves shimmering like jewels in the light. He knows this place instinctively, though he's never seen it, Eden. The world before corruption, before the flood, before pain. Noah stirs in the night, tears quietly leaking from closed eyes. The vision clings to him like dew, stirring a deep ache in his chest, not for what was, but for what could have been. He reflects on humanity's journey, the glory lost to pride and violence, the innocence traded for power. He longs for that purity again, that simple closeness to God where no altar was needed, where nothing had to die to make things right. In the stillness, he offers a quiet prayer, not for answers, but for peace, that one day, his children's children might walk in something like Eden again, even if only in spirit. The next evening, as golden light spills across the hills, Noah's family gathers for their first true meal on solid ground. The women have foraged wild herbs and roots, combining them with stored grains and dried fruits that survived the voyage. Japheth experiments over the fire with a flatbread that bubbles unevenly on a hot stone, while Shem slices dried figs into a thick paste. The scent is unfamiliar, yet comforting, new recipes born from old ingredients, crafted with patience and a spirit of curiosity. Plates are passed, hands brush, and stomachs rumble in anticipation. It's humble fare, but tonight it feels like a feast. Laughter returns to the table slowly, at first in soft chuckles, then growing into full, unguarded joy. Ham teases Japheth for burning the edges of the bread, prompting mock outrage. Even Noah, so often solemn these days, breaks into a grin at his wife's gentle teasing. Around the fire, their faces glow not only with warmth, but with life, renewed, hopeful, ready to begin again. The flood is behind them. Ahead lies an unwritten story, and tonight, around this simple meal, they taste the first lines of its telling. Later that night, the crackling fire becomes the center of their quiet world. With bellies full and the night air cooling around them, the family gathers close, shoulders touching, breaths visible in the dark. Noah's voice carries steady and low, shaped by decades of memory and reverence. He begins with Adam, how the world began in a garden, with soil cradling the first man's form and breath drawn straight from God's mouth. His words paint Eden in vibrant detail, the towering trees, the river that split into four, and the day sin entered like a shadow. The children listen, rapt, the flames dancing across their wide eyes as if illuminating ancient truths. From Adam he moves to Enoch, the one who walked so closely with God that he did not die, only disappeared into the divine. Each tale holds weight, not just as stories, but as inheritance. These are not bedtime fables, they are the roots of their identity, carved into memory like etchings on stone. Noah speaks slowly, repeating key lines until even the youngest mouths them along. In a world washed clean, this oral history is their anchor, preserving the past, warning the future, and reminding each listener that they are part of something far older, far holier, than any flood or fire could erase. Later that evening, long after the fire has burned low and the last story has faded into silence, Noah steps away from the sleeping forms of his family and lifts his gaze skyward. The sky stretches vast and black above him, untouched by smoke or city light. For the first time in months, the stars blaze with uncanny clarity, sharper, brighter, almost reborn after the flood. He traces patterns among them, some familiar from childhood shepherding days, others wholly new, as if the heavens themselves were reshaped by the deluge. The constellations seem to hum with quiet intention, as though God has left messages written in starlight. As Noah stands beneath that vast canopy, he feels both infinitesimally small and profoundly seen. The stars pulse like gentle eyes, witnesses to the flood, to survival, to covenant. He sees the arc of the bear, but now it bends like a boat. Orion's belt gleams near a new formation that reminds him of birds in flight. These are not random scatterings of light anymore. They feel like divine fingerprints, a celestial reminder that order can emerge from chaos. In the quiet of that moment, Noah breathes deep, sensing not just survival, but purpose, his role not only to preserve life, but to read the signs, pass them down, and walk faithfully under this newly drawn sky. The next morning, laughter echoes across the clearing as children chase one another between the tents. Their bare feet thud against soft earth, and their shrieks pierce the stillness like birdsong. A boy balances on a fallen tree while two girls braid flowers into each other's hair. For the first time in what feels like a lifetime, joy is uncontained, spilling freely from hearts too young to carry the weight of what was lost. Their play feels sacred, as if innocence itself had found root again in the ashes of judgment. Noah watches from a distance, leaning against a rough-hewn post, his hands still calloused from the ark. These children weren't just spared, they are the beginning of everything. Proof that life has not only endured, but is eager to flourish. Every giggle, every leap, is a reminder of God's mercy, that the world was not entirely swept away, that grace had been written into the story from the start. As the sun warms the earth and voices rise in play, Noah closes his eyes and whispers thanks. The flood has passed, but the future, blessed, bright, and brimming with promise, has only just begun. Under the rising sun, the sharp ring of stones striking wood echoes across the valley. Noah's sons have begun the next chapter, crafting homes from the earth that once lay beneath the flood. Ham and Shem carry freshly carved beams, their shoulders taut with effort, while Japheth smooths clay to seal the cracks between stones. Simple tools, once forgotten during the long months aboard the ark, are now extensions of their hands again. The scent of worked wood mingles with damp soil, and with every wall that rises, hope becomes more than just a feeling, it becomes something you can touch. By the week's end, the outlines of a village begin to take shape. Smoke curls from the first thatched roof, where a small hearth now flickers inside. Goats bleat in a pen hastily assembled near the fields, and a few hens cluck noisily from woven baskets. It's not grandeur, but it's stability. Life, brick by brick, is being rebuilt. As Noah walks among the forming homes, he sees not just survival, but the birth of legacy, something sturdy enough to hold generations, rising where once there was only water and waiting. In the quiet hours of early morning, Noah kneels before a flat slab of stone set into the hillside. His hands, roughened by labor and years, move with surprising gentleness as he chisels each name into the surface, names remembered from cities now buried beneath layers of silt and memory. He carves not in bitterness, but in reverence. These were people he knew, neighbors, merchants, children. The sound of the chisel echoes through the stillness, each strike a drumbeat of remembrance. His sons watch from a respectful distance, understanding that this act is as sacred as any altar. At the base of the memorial, Noah etches a final line, not a name, but a covenant. Never again, the stone reads, framed by a carved bow stretched across the sky. It's more than a promise, it's a testimony. A marker for future generations to read, to remember, and to understand the price of both disobedience and mercy. The stone is left unfinished at its base, space reserved for what is still to come, for what God will continue to do through the families that now take root in this new world. Days later, clouds begin to gather once more, slow, creeping formations that dim the sky and drop the temperature. A hush falls over the new village as the first droplets fall, tapping softly against freshly carved wood and upturned faces. Noah steps out from beneath a half-constructed awning, his heart clenched. Around him, old memories stir, sounds of screaming, of thunder cracking like punishment, of the ark swaying under heaven's wrath. His sons pause their work, children clutch their mother's robes, and even the animals grow restless. No one speaks, but all remember. The rain continues gently into the night, but this time, there is no flood. The streams rise no higher than their banks, the soil drinks eagerly, and by morning the clouds begin to break apart. Noah walks to the stone where he etched the covenant and lays his hand upon it. The rainbow does not appear this time, but the promise holds. One by one, the people emerge, faces turned skyward not in fear but in cautious gratitude. This rain brings no judgment, only growth. And with that realization, a deep sigh passes through the camp like wind through tall grass, relief. At dawn, for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, a single clear note pierces the stillness, birdsong. It begins hesitantly, as if testing the silence, then grows into a soft chorus echoing across the hills. Noah steps outside, his breath visible in the cool morning air, and listens with awe. Trees that had been stripped bare by wind and water now show hints of green. Tiny shoots push through the soil, reclaiming what was once lost. Streams sparkle under the early light, no longer torrents of judgment but veins of life. It's as though creation itself is exhaling, stretching, waking up, beginning again. New life emerges in ways they hadn't anticipated. Brightly feathered birds none of them recognize flit through the sky in pairs. In the underbrush, unfamiliar creatures move with quiet purpose, some small and timid, others bold in color and sound. The children chase after them with delighted squeals, and even the adults watch with cautious curiosity. These are not just survivors of the flood, they are part of a renewed earth, a fresh chapter. Noah watches it all, eyes brimming, heart swelling with reverence. Nature, under God's hand, is not just returning, it is reinventing itself. In the shaded grove near the edge of the new settlement, a soft bleating breaks the morning stillness. One of the goats lies on her side, sides heaving, eyes wide. Noah kneels beside her, his hands gentle and steady as the miracle of birth unfolds before him. A slick, trembling kid emerges, greeted by a burst of warm sunlight through the trees. It's the first birth since the floodwaters receded, the first true sign that the world is not just recovering, but continuing. Word spreads quickly, and soon others arrive, witnessing new foals, calves, and nests filled with chirping life. Each moment feels sacred, a confirmation that the cycle God established in Eden has not been lost, only paused. There's an unmistakable rhythm to it now, male and female in perfect harmony, as if creation itself remembers the instructions placed deep within its design. Noah's sons help gather straw, create pens, and tend to the young. Their wives laugh with awe as they cradle new lambs and guide chicks to feed. There's a peace in this balance, a restoration not just of life but of divine order. The family begins to speak not of survival, but of legacy. Every birth becomes a symbol, a quiet proclamation that the earth, though once judged, is now chosen again for blessing. As the sun dips low on the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the quiet land, the family gathers in silence. The tools are set down, the fires burn gently, and no animal is led or burdened. It is the Sabbath, set apart, just as it was before the flood, just as it was when God first rested after the work of creation. Noah sits cross-legged near the altar, his hands folded, his gaze lifted toward the darkening sky. Around him, his sons and their wives settle into stillness, their bodies finally given permission to exhale after so many days of building, preparing, surviving. There is no labor, no planning, just breath and stillness and memory. The quiet hum of nature takes over, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the soft lowing of a calf nursing nearby, the gentle rhythm of wind across grass. It is in this hush that Noah feels closest to the Creator, more so than during the storm, more than when the rainbow first broke across the sky. This rest is not idleness but reverence. He whispers ancient words of praise, words his father taught him, words that once echoed in a pre-flood world. Now, they return like old friends, carrying the weight of survival and the hope of restoration. In this sacred stillness, time seems to pause, and the bond between man and God renews itself like a covenant freshly carved in the soul. Noah's voice is steady, low, and weathered with time as he gathers the children near the fire. Their eyes are wide, reflecting the flames as they lean in close, curious, and quiet. He begins not with thunder or flood, but with wood, how the ark was built plank by plank, each nail driven by faith more than force. He tells them of the first creak of the great vessel, the days spent guiding animals up the ramp, the smell of hay and rain mingling in the air. The children sit rapt, their small fingers tracing patterns in the dirt, their minds painting the world he describes, a world submerged, then reborn. But the stories carry more than memory. With each word, Noah weaves in lessons about obedience, patience, and listening for God's voice even when it sounds like silence. He warns against pride, recalls the laughter of those who mocked him, and explains how grace looks like a door shut by God's own hand. These tales are not just history, they are legacy. Wisdom passed like a torch into young hands, meant to burn long after he is gone. As the night deepens and stars emerge, the children ask questions, and Noah answers gently, knowing these are the seeds of a future he will never see but is helping shape. Noah watches from a shaded spot beneath a fig tree as his sons, once boys clambering up scaffold beams, now speak with the calm assurance of men who have seen both ruin and renewal. Shem confers with neighbors about the irrigation of fields, Ham tends to livestock with a practiced eye, Japheth speaks with younger families, settling disputes with the same wisdom once sought from Noah himself. The village pulses with life, routines, and order, evidence that leadership has changed hands without the world slipping into chaos. Noah says little, content to let their voices rise while his becomes part of the background hum, like the rustling of old leaves. He begins to spend more time alone, walking the edge of the new vineyards, tracing the riverbank with slow steps, pausing to let the wind comb through his silvered beard. His strength isn't what it was, and he doesn't try to pretend otherwise. Instead, he embraces this twilight season, not as an ending but as a handover. The burden of rebuilding is no longer his to carry, and in that release, there is peace. He still offers counsel when asked, but increasingly he finds joy in simply observing, a grandson learning to shape tools, a song sung around the fire that he once hummed long ago. Leadership has passed, and the world, rebuilt by grace and grit, moves forward. In the quiet moments before dawn, Noah sits atop a gentle rise, the fields and forests below bathed in a silvery pre-sunlight hush. The air is crisp, and his breath clouds softly in front of him. Here, with only the wind and the occasional rustle of an animal nearby, he lets his mind wander back, through decades of toil, loss, and waiting. He remembers the ridicule, the aching years of unanswered prophecy, the strain of building something no one believed in. Doubts had visited him often, shadowy and persistent, whispering that he'd misunderstood, that perhaps no flood would come, that he'd wasted his family's future. And yet, obedience had anchored him. Not because it promised clarity, but because it was all he had left when certainty vanished. Now, the reward of that obedience spreads out before him, not in riches or accolades, but in the beating hearts of his descendants, the green shoots bursting from soil once drowned in judgment, and the slow, steady return of order. He doesn't pretend to understand God's ways, why the flood was necessary, why he was chosen, why some were spared and others not. But in that mystery, there's a deeper trust. The covenant still shines in the rainbow that sometimes graces the sky, a reminder that even in wrath, God remembered mercy. And as Noah closes his eyes, he does so with a heart full not of answers, but of peace, the kind that follows when faith walks where reason cannot. The chill in Noah's bones lingers longer each morning. What once felt like simple weariness now settles into his joints with a heaviness that no rest can lift. His steps slow, his voice softens, and even his once calloused hands tremble slightly as he blesses the evening meal. The family notices, though no one speaks of it outright. Instead, they linger longer at his side, help more quickly when he rises, and laugh more gently at his old stories. As his body weakens, the presence of his sons and grandchildren surrounds him like a living blanket, warm with love, full of reverence. He smiles often, especially when the children tug at his robe to hear the tale of the dove or the time the first rainbow painted the sky. Lying beneath the open canopy, stars blinking into view, Noah feels the edges of life narrowing, like the ark's final door gently closing. But there is no fear. Only a deep, rooted sense of completion. The world has been reborn. Life, renewed. His mission, though harrowing, was fulfilled. With his family safe, the land green again, and the covenant carved into memory and stone, he knows his purpose has run its course. In soft whispers and gentle prayers, he begins to release his hold on the earth, comforted by the peace that only obedience, endurance, and grace can bring. Noah's breathing slows as dusk paints the sky in soft purples and golds. His family gathers quietly, the flicker of oil lamps casting gentle shadows across the walls. In the hush of the moment, Noah lifts his hand, a final gesture, and with the last of his strength, begins to speak. His voice is rasped but resolute, shaped by decades of faith, storms, and survival. Lord, he whispers, you spoke, and I listened. You flooded, and I trusted. You spared, and I give thanks. Every word is a release, not just to the heavens, but to his descendants seated before him, each syllable a stone in the foundation of their future. He places one trembling hand on Shem's shoulder, then Ham's, then Japheth's. With deliberate care, he offers his final blessing, not just for them, but for the generations that will rise from them. His prayer is simple, that they walk with God, that they honor the earth, and that they remember the power of obedience and mercy. As his eyes close, a soft wind stirs the tent's edge, as though creation itself leans in to listen. In this quiet, sacred moment, the man who built an ark with trembling hands returns everything, his breath, his burden, his blessing, back to the God who gave it. The dawn after Noah's final prayer arrives in silence, the morning sky hushed as if the heavens themselves are grieving. His body lies still, wrapped in linen and cedar branches, surrounded by the people who once boarded the ark by his command. His sons carry him to a shaded grove near the edge of the new village, their steps slow, reverent. The ground is soft from recent rains, and the air smells of wet earth and blooming life. As they lower him into the soil, they whisper prayers over the man who had carried humanity through judgment, who had listened when no one else would. Around the grave, stories begin to rise like incense, Shem recounting the moment Noah first heard God's voice, Japheth remembering the day the animals arrived, Ham speaking softly of his father's steady hands during the darkest nights of the flood. The grandchildren listen wide-eyed, absorbing each word like scripture. A simple stone marks the grave, but the true memorial is in their voices, in the retelling of obedience, of courage, of second chances. Noah is gone, but his legacy roots itself in their bones, in the soil, in the very breath of a world reborn. Generations pass like the wind across the open fields, and from the quiet strength of Noah's lineage, new civilizations begin to rise. Grandchildren become patriarchs, and great-grandchildren shape the land with stone and timber, building villages that swell into towns, towns that stretch into cities. The rhythm of life returns with a steady pulse, harvests planted, homes erected, children born under constellations that once watched the ark drift in silence. The ark itself becomes legend, its remains a sacred relic high upon Ararat, visited by the faithful who still walk the path Noah forged in obedience. But the flood is not forgotten. Around cooking fires and in temple courtyards, the elders still speak of the days when water covered every hill, when judgment came not as flame or sword, but as silence and drowning. They remember the sound of rain on timber and the cries that were never answered. Children learn early to respect the skies, to heed the signs, and to trust the voice of God when it calls, however strange, however costly. Though the earth is new, memory anchors them. And so, the story lives on, not just in stone or scroll, but in the whispered awe of those who remember the mercy that followed the storm. One afternoon, as clouds scatter and the golden light of the sun breaks through after a gentle rain, a familiar arc stretches across the sky, vivid and radiant. A rainbow, spanning from horizon to horizon, captures every eye in the village. Children stop their games mid-motion, mouths agape, fingers pointing upward in awe. Their laughter softens to reverent silence as the colors shimmer overhead. For many, it's their first time seeing such a wonder. But for the elders, especially those who still remember Noah's voice, it is far more than just beauty, it is a holy sign. Around the fire that evening, the families gather closer as the oldest among them retells the story of the flood and the promise that followed. That rainbow, he says, his voice crackling like the flames, was the sign of God's covenant. His vow that never again will all life be destroyed by floodwaters. The children listen, eyes wide, absorbing the gravity behind the colors they marveled at hours earlier. In their hearts, a seed of faith is planted, a connection not just to the past, but to the divine mercy that still watches over them. The covenant is not forgotten. It is carried forward, bright as the sky's arch, alive in every retelling. The seasons roll forward, and with each passing month, the world awakens more vibrantly. Trees that once stood bare and battered now wear thick canopies of green. Vines creep up newly formed rocks, flowers bloom where muddy waters once churned, and birds fill the air with song, not out of fear or hunger, but joy. Streams that once surged with fury now flow gently, nurturing the land. The earth, cleansed and reborn, breathes again with life abundant. The people watch in awe as creation heals itself, colors deepening, fruit returning, and shade falling again over sun-warmed ground. Animals, too, begin to thrive. Where once they huddled frightened in the ark, now they roam freely, herds grazing in peace, birds nesting without weariness, predators and prey temporarily united by the shared memory of survival. Children walk among lambs and sparrows with no fear, and even the wary eyes of once feral beasts seem gentler. It is not Eden, but for a moment, it echoes its harmony. Noah's family tends their new home with humility, aware that what surrounds them isn't just recovery, it's grace. The land is alive with promise again, and for the first time in many years, the world feels full of peace. Beneath the golden haze of the harvest sun, women gather in the fields, their hands busy among sheaves of grain. As they work, their voices rise in song, ancient melodies carried down through generations. Among the verses are lines about Noah, the man who walked with God, who built the ark with aching hands and unwavering faith. His name is woven into lullabies sung to children, and into laments during drought and storm. Though many have forgotten the depth of his obedience, his image endures, weathered, strong, faithful, as a symbol of protection and providence. Around fires at night, elders speak of the great vessel that once rode the floodwaters. Children stare wide-eyed as tales of roaring beasts and endless rain fill the air. The ark, once real and massive, now floats through stories like a dream, part history, part myth. Some say the remains rest high in a distant mountain range. Others claim it vanished when the waters receded, taken back into the mystery of God. But whether as legend or memory, the ark endures, not as a boat, but as a beacon. A reminder, sung and spoken, that when all was lost, one man listened, and through him, the world was born again. In the quiet hours of dusk, by the flickering light of oil lamps, Noah's descendants gather around a smooth stone table. A thick scroll lies unrolled before them, its surface marked by careful hands and reverent hearts. Using sharpened reeds and dark ink pressed from berries, the family begins to record the story, not just of the flood, but of obedience, faith, survival, and God's covenant. They write of the ark's construction, the animals' arrival, the silence of the storm, and the rainbow that followed. Every word is chosen with care, each line meant to preserve truth through time. This is not merely record-keeping, it is worship. The scroll is wrapped tightly and placed in a carved cedar container, then stored in the heart of their home like a sacred ember. It is understood that this story must endure long after the storytellers are gone. The children are taught to recite it, and their children after them. One day, when tribes spread far across the earth, and when distant tongues no longer recall the taste of rain or the ache of floating above a drowned world, this scroll will remain. A voice from the past, whispering the truth of how one family, through divine instruction and unwavering faith, became the bridge between two worlds. In the stillness of night, long after the scroll has been sealed and the fires have dimmed to embers, Noah's story lingers, not just in words, but in the marrow of his descendants. The winds that once howled over an endless sea have faded into memory, yet the lesson remains clear. When the world unraveled, it was not might or brilliance that endured, but obedience. A man who built a vessel in sunshine, trusting warnings of rain. A father who withstood mockery, carried grief, and followed a voice no one else could hear. His faith wasn't forged in comfort, but in silence, struggle, and storm. Now, with the earth green again and children laughing where there was once only floodwater, the reflection settles deep. Storms may return, both from sky and soul, but God's covenant remains. To follow divine guidance when it defies reason. To hold fast to hope when nothing around you affirms it. This is the legacy Noah left, not just the ark or the scroll, but the living call to trust when all seems lost. And in that obedience, even when the clouds gather again, there will always be a promise shimmering just beyond the rain.
Thank you for joining me on this quiet, powerful journey through the story of Noah. As the ark found rest, so I hope this time has brought peace to your soul. Whether you drifted off midway or stayed with me until the final whisper, know that these ancient words still carry comfort, strength, and stillness, especially in the stormy moments of our own lives. If this helped you rest, reflect, or reconnect, I'd love for you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment with a thought or feeling that stayed with you. I'll leave the rain sounds playing with a dark screen for about 10 more minutes, so feel free to settle in and let your mind drift deeper into sleep. Good night, God bless, and may peace be with you.